Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. Today's movie I'm going to review is Now, I know it's been a few days since I've recorded any movie reviews, but I've just been a little busy. And also, I recorded 2 reviews for October that'll premiere in October. But, anyways, we're just getting back to a normal movie review, a non-horror related movie review for now. Now, granted, the horror movie reviews are coming in October. I already recorded those videos and I uploaded them, but they're not able to be watched until October because I set premieres for them. But I'm gonna review a non-horror movie, but just a disaster movie that I actually rather like. And that is the 1997 disaster movie Volcano, starring Tommy Lee Jones. So the plot of the movie is as follows. When a massive earthquake rocks LA City, Emergency Management Department head Mike Rourke, played by Tommy Lee Jones, returns from his vacation to help with the city's response. After geologist Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Heche, warns that a volcano may be forming in sewer tunnels, Mike Rourke and Dr. Amy Barnes must figure out a way to stop this threat. So that's the basic plot synopsis to the movie, and again, I do overall like this movie. So how was this movie received? Well, in 1996, Twister was a huge box office hit for Universal, and the same year, Independence Day was a huge hit for 20th Century Fox. Because of this, 20th Century Fox wanted to make a disaster movie called Volcano, and were hoping it would be as big as Twister and Independence Day were. When the movie released on April 25th, 1997, it received mixed reviews from critics and audiences, and at the end of its theatrical run made $120 million worldwide off a $90 million budget and was considered a box office disappointment. It also faced stiff competition against another Volcano movie from 1997 called Dante's Peak, which was a volcano disaster movie made by Universal, released a few months earlier. While Dante's Peak made more money, it still wasn't as big as Universal had hoped it would be. I personally like the 1997 disaster movie Dante's Peak, starring Pierce Brosnan and Linda Hamilton, but that's besides the point. As for my reaction of the movie, yeah, Volcano is a great disaster movie, very underrated, and it's overall my third favorite Tommy Lee Jones movie behind classics like The Fugitive and Under Siege. Now, one thing I will say, it is a shame that this movie does not have a better proper DVD release. I mean, back in the day, this DVD was cheap. Now, granted, I'm pretty sure that if you find this in like a pawn shop, I'm sure you can find it cheap on DVD, but I'm talking in terms of like, buying the movie DVD-wise off a website like either Amazon or eBay. I mean, for example, when I got this movie off Amazon, the cheapest copy I was able to find was $20 off Amazon, which is this copy that I own right here. However, I accidentally bought a Region 1 copy. Now, for those who don't know what a Region 1 DVD player is, it's basically a type of DVD player that's not sold in the US, and unless you have like a PS5 or a Region 1 disc, then you can't play Region 1 DVD, so I wasn't even really able to watch this. Now, granted, I'd seen the movie years before I had it on DVD. I first saw this movie 12 years ago on Netflix when it was on there, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, heck, I've seen some copies of this DVD go up to $80 on Amazon, which is absolutely ridiculous. Anyways, though, I was luckily able to get a second copy on Amazon for just slightly under $40, which is the version I have here with this one. And luckily, it was a disc for a US DVD player. The only streaming services this movie is on that's available at the moment is Google Play Movies and TV, Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Fandango at home. But on all those services, you have to rent the movie for only $3.97. But Last time I checked, which was last night, this movie was free on YouTube with ads. So it might still be on there free with ads. I don't know. I haven't checked at the moment as I'm recording this video. But yes, I honestly wish this movie had a better, proper, cheaper DVD in the US, as honestly, I think more physical media collectors should have the opportunity to watch this. But of course, since this movie was done by 20th Century Fox and Disney owns 20th Century Fox, this movie will probably never get a proper DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K disc release. Yet here's the thing. Disney is the same company that put Snow White 2025 out on 4K starring Rachel Zegler, and that movie was severely hated by many fans of the original 1937 Disney classic movie, and is considered the worst Disney remake currently, and it's actually rated as one of the worst movies ever on IMDb, and that was a huge flop. I mean, come on, really? That movie gets a 4K release, but not a great movie like this. And also, now granted, I know Disney does not own the companies that makes these movies, but movies like the 2024 comic book movie Madam Web, as well as the 2024 video game movie adaptation Borderlands, those two movies sucked, and those movies were hated by many fans of the IP, yet somehow those movies get a 4K. Yeah. There is so many great movies that don't get a proper DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K release, but crappy movies that nobody likes that don't deserve it get a 4K release. So stupid. And I've seen some copies of this movie go for pretty expensive off of Amazon. So if you're an Amazon shopper, good luck trying to find this for cheap on VHS if you do collect VHS. And like I said, I was able to get a second copy, and instead of the Region 1, which was the first copy I got an American disc, but I went to the cheapest copy used, and I was able to get this for just slightly under $40. But yeah, it's such a shame that this movie doesn't have a proper release. But anyways, that's besides the point. Without further ado, let's get into my review on Volcano. The movie starts off where the screen says, "The Office of Emergency Management is a permanent division of the city of LA. In the event of an emergency or natural disaster, its director has the power to control and command all the resources of the city." The screen then cuts to LA City, or Los Angeles City, with a news reporter live on TV saying, "It is 9 a.m., temperature is 72 degrees, and then it cuts to another news reporter saying, "A backup at Hoover due to police activity is off on the off-ramp. There was a drive-by shooting, eyelid surgery, body sculpting, citric acid peels, whatever it takes to create a whole new you." Then it cuts to another TV news program saying, "Can plankton cure cancer? The answer may can plankton cure cancer? The answer may surprise you. According to a study by the Institute of Holistic Research," and then it cuts to another news program saying, "A boy of 15 is sentenced to 10 years for armed robbery. The judge sends him to an adult sentence." Then the camera zooms underground in total darkness. Then we see the red title screen of the movie. The word Volcano appears, hence the title of the movie. Then we see a shot of the lava under the ground's crust briefly. Then we are introduced to our main character of the movie, Mike Rorick, played by Tommy Lee Jones, who is cooking eggs and yells to his daughter, "Kelly, your eggs are ready." But then I like the part when Mike Rorick, he grabs the handle of the pot and he says hot because it's a little too hot, and then he sets it on the counter only for it to fall on the ground, and then Mike tells his dog Max to clean up the mess. The movie then cuts to St. Vincent Hospital, downtown LA at 9:13 a.m., where a man is rushed into a hospital by Dr. J. Calder, who is played by Jacqueline Kim. I think that's how you say the actress's name. She tries to close the open wounds on the man, but before she can do that, a minor earthquake hits LA for like 10 seconds, but then it stops. Now, one thing about this movie I really like is its sense of humor. I love the scene when Mike Rourke says to his daughter, "I can't leave you here after an earthquake." But then his daughter Kelly says, "Why not? I know what to do." And then Mike Rourke says, "Okay, what do you do?" But then Kelly says, "Head between your, put your head in between the door frame, head between your knees, put your head in the door frame, and kiss your ass goodbye." Like I thought that scene was pretty funny. But then Mike Rourke, played by Tommy Lee Jones, says, "Okay, I'm calling a babysitter." And another thing I forgot to mention, Tommy Lee Jones's character, his daughter in this movie is actually played by Gabby Hoffman. If you're not familiar with who that is as an actress, she played the little girl, she played Macaulay Culkin's sister in the 1989 comedy movie Uncle Buck about 8 years before this movie. So it's pretty cool to see her in this type of movie. But yeah, that scene as a whole was pretty funny. Another thing I will say works really well about this movie is the cast and characters. I mean, you got Tommy Lee Jones as Mike Rourke, Don Cheadle, yes, War Machine himself from the Marvel movies as Emmett Reese, Keith David as the police lieutenant, Anne Heche as Dr. Amy Barnes, Gabby Hoffman as Kelly Rourke, Jacqueline Kim as Dr. Jake Cadler, and John Carroll Lynch as Stan Olber, just to name a few. We are then introduced to Stan, the character Stan Olber, played by John Carroll Lynch, who, granted, he only had a brief cameo, but he was in the first Jurassic Park movie as one of the workers at the place, so that's pretty cool. But anyways, we're introduced to that character who's at the construction site at the Red Line subway at 9:25 a.m. Then him and his workers bet money on what the epicenter and magnitude will be. We are then introduced to Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Heche, rest in peace, great actress. In this movie, she plays a geologist. She then goes live on TV and says this was a small to moderate earthquake epicentered in Palmdale. Then Stan says out loud, "Palmdale, Gabi's got it. Gabi's the winner. Get out of here." The movie then cuts to the Office of Emergency Management at 9:38 a.m. Emmett Reese, played by Don Cheadle, is on the phone and he says, "You can go to work. The building's been retrofitted. It's my job. It's my job to know, sweetheart." But then Emmett says, "I have to go," and hangs up the phone when Mike arrives. Emmett then says to Mike, "It is so you to blow a vacation day for a tremor. Why are you here, Mike? Vacation means you don't come in." But then Mike says, "If a dam breaks and the mayor calls, you'll say Rourke went fishing." Emmett then says, "The mayor is in Aspen. We don't pull her off the slopes for a 4.9 magnitude. Besides, I'll cover for you." Mike then says, "I'm sure you would. You looked comfortable sitting behind my desk." Emmett then says, "Yeah, it was like I belonged there." And then, anyways, a security camera shows what's happening in one area of LA, and Mike says, "What is that?" But then a man says, "Water, main eruption." Emmett then says, "I sent some crew members out there. Other than that, the phone lines and power lines are all up." And then, Mike thanks him. The movie then cuts to MacArthur Park at 9:47 a.m., and a worker gets pulled out the ground in a hole that leads to a storm drain, and he basically comes out of the hole with yellow steam coming up. And one of the guys who pulls him out the hole, he basically asks a police officer for an ambulance, and then he asks, "Where's Danny? Danny, where are the others?" But then the guy basically says, and then the guy who was in the storm drain says, "They're all burned up, hot." Then he passes out and his face tips sideways, and we see half of his face is burned up, like half of his face is black and burnt up, kind of like Two-Face in The Dark Knight, or, the second Batman movie in the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy. Or really just Two-Face from the Batman comics, as we all know. Really good makeup effects, too, on that scene. Mike then arrives at MacArthur Park to investigate. Mike basically asks what happened, and a worker says, "Freak accident in a storm drain. They hit a steam pipe and they got and they got scandaled. No fires, no explosions, no continuing threat. We'll copy you on the report. But then Mike says in disbelief, Steam did that? Stan then arrives and Mike says, come here, I want to show you something. Mike is pointing on a map and says, this is where your problem was. This is your red line tunnel. I want to close down this section just as a precaution until we know. Maybe the earthquake tore something up. Let's see. Then we cut back to the hospital where Dr. J. Calder gives the passed out man some more morphine. But then the passed out man, she decides to cut up the passed out man's burnt clothing, and then Jay says, steam doesn't char clothing like this. This is a flame burn. Mike then decides to go down the storm drain with a worker named Gator, and Emmett is using radio communication to talk to Mike. And then Emmett Reese says, this is Emmett Reese. Emmett Reese to ground control. LA, any problem? Do you copy? Then Mike says, yeah, we copy. Hot as HELL down here. But then, not long after that, Gator, which is his partner, is underground and by the storm drain with Mike. Gator then gets a reading on a handheld machine and very loud beeping in a red light. But then Mike basically says over the radio communication, this is a steam vent. Water and power had it right. Steam's coming up through a crack in the concrete. Tremendous heat. The tunnels then start shaking. Mike starts to feel extreme heat. But then I like the part when Gator sees some dead rats and he says, look at those rats, they're cooked. But then Mike, Rorik, and Gator, they run away. They run away. So they run away from the ground shaking, and they barely manage to seal the door shut due to the strong force of the blast of sparks coming out the side of it. But then Mike Rorik comes out the hole, and so does Gator. And basically Emmett asks what's going on, but then Mike Rorik says, get LAPD on the line, clear everyone out of this park. Get Ober on the telephone before we lose some trains down there. Freeze off everything. Gas lines, refinery lines, gas coming out of the tube. I don't know what it was. Sparks flying, very hot. And find me a scientist who can tell me what's going on here. Mike then meets up with the character Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Heche, and Dr. Amy Barnes says, it's possible that when the tectonic plates shift, magma goes up through the cracks. But then Mike says, lava here in LA, questioning it, and then Dr. Amy Barnes says, it is unlikely, but it is a possibility. Dr. Amy Barnes then says to her female partner, Rachel, that she says to her, because she basically, so before then, Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Heche, talks to Mike Rorik and says, I'm thinking about collecting some samples to see what's going on, and Mike says, I can't let you do that, it's too dangerous. But as soon as Mike leaves, Dr. Amy Barnes starts talking to her female partner, Rachel, and says, Mike said it was too dangerous. But then they talk about, well, how about we go up here and collect some samples? And Rachel says, we can't do that. It's surrounded by cops. And then she says, well, how about this? How about we do it before the cops show up? I'll pick you up at 4 a.m. when no one's around, and I'll bring coffee. And Rachel agrees to it. And then we cut to a scene where at 5:10 a.m. in the morning, a train is in the subway tunnel. Dr. Amy Barnes and Rachel are in the storm drain to basically get a sample to see what's going on with this whole, these earthquakes and stuff happening, and the steam and stuff. At 5:14 a.m. in Palmdale, an earthquake wakes up the whole city. Mike then goes to his daughter Kelly to protect her when an earthquake is shaking in the house, and throughout the course of the movie, it does all sorts of damage. I mean, the earthquake in the movie, it stops a train, it knocks buildings over, also, not necessarily knock buildings over right away, but it does, it causes crazy stuff to happen, to say the least. And Dr. Amy Barnes' partner, Rachel, falls through a crack and is boiled to death. Now, granted, we don't see her die on screen, it does cut it off screen, but with the way it was filmed, it was a rather effective scene. And Dr. Amy Barnes is sad that she wasn't able to save her partner Rachel, but then at 5:16 a.m. in the morning, everyone goes to the emergency office and Emmett demands an emergency meeting in 5 minutes. But then Mike Rourke is driving the car with his daughter, Kelly, to go to the safest place. I love the scene when Mike Rourke basically asked Emmett how he found out about important information so fast, and Emmett says, "Get in, come on, boss, I sleep on your desk, disaster is my life." And then Kelly looks at Mike, and Mike says, "He's kidding, baby." I thought that scene was funny. Mike is driving the car, but then he stops the car as he sees many sewer lids shooting up in the air from steam coming out of the ground. And then one of the moments we've all been waiting for is where lava shoots out the ground and magma rocks start to fly everywhere, and Mike is driving away from it very fast, the best he can. But then Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Heche, gets out the hole and plans to meet up with Mike. But then the character Stan, he decides to gather up a team to rescue the passengers trapped on the train, where the lava will arrive soon, which does lead to one of my favorite scenes of the movie, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But Kelly Rourke, she's outside running, and because lava comes close to the car, and she's shouting for her dad, Mike Rourke, and a piece of magma rock, a piece of the lava sprays out the magma rock. Some of it gets on Kelly's leg, and she gets a second-degree burn. But then Dr. Jay Calder rushes Kelly to an area to get medical treatment so her burn doesn't get infected. And then Mike Rourke makes his daughter Kelly go with her. But anyways, let's talk about my favorite scene of the movie. My favorite scene of the movie by far is when Stan gathers up the team to rescue passengers on the stuck train. I mean, the whole scene where Stan is on the train holding out the train conductor's passed out body and walks to the front of the train is a well done scene, because lava is under the train and there's at least 15 feet of it. 15 feet of lava goes past the train, and then everyone yells at Stan, "Jump, Stan! Stan, get out of there, jump!" But then Stan yells at his partners, "Get out of here!" They then yell at him, "Man, you can't save him. Come on, save yourself." And come on, save yourself. And then there's the whole scene where Stan does a hero sacrifice where he jumps in the lava, and he's burning on fire, screaming in agony, but he manages to throw a person's body to safety on the ground away from the lava. Again, very well done scene. I also enjoyed the scene when now, I don't know the technical term for what this is called, but I'm sure you've seen them before. Now, you know how sometimes on the road, construction workers, like, they'll take, like, those, I guess stone squares is how I describe them, but they're basically meant to block off areas. I enjoyed the whole scene in this movie when a bunch of people take, multiple of that item, and they use it to block off lava in the city, and they have, like, fire trucks and other stuff blocking it too. And then firefighters are using water hoses from their fire truck to turn the lava to crust, and then a bunch of helicopters are dumping water on the lava. I enjoyed that scene too. I also enjoyed the whole scene where a cute pet dog is trapped inside a house with lava, but the dog gets his toy and he escapes the burning house that's filling up with lava. I like that scene as well. I like the part when Kelly is inside a mall for safety and a little boy named Tommy is inside the building and they play rock, paper, scissors, and Kelly says, scissors doesn't beat paper, and then the kid says, "I'm not paper, I'm lava. What beats that?" And then Kelly says, "My dad, hopefully." Not long after that, the lava is on land, is slowed down by Mike and Dr. Amy Barnes. Not long after the lava on land is slowed down, Dr. Amy Barnes and Mike Rorick find out that there's a tunnel insulating lava because it's basically like a lava tube. It's keeping it superheated, fluid, and moving fast. And it'll basically go through the tunnels until it hits a block. In other words, the main eruption will happen. And the lava is only 30 minutes away from the mall that Kelly's at. And Mike is like, you know, we got to get my daughter and save her and stuff like that. But basically, Mike Rorick, played by Tommy Lee Jones, he basically plans to use, to get the police lieutenant to use, to start detonating the place to basically create a train, to basically blow holes in the ground to create a path that lava will flow through to get into the ocean, so the lava turns to crust and the city's saved, which is a solid plan. But then, not long after that, Kelly Rorick, she loses the boy Tommy, who ran out the building. The main eruption, not long after this happens, and it's a great scene, where lava's just spraying up in the air and stuff like that. The whole scene where the little boy Tommy is walking outside on the ground, and the pathway is being made by the police lieutenant detonating the place, but then Mike Rorick is yelling at the cops on the walkie-talkie. He tells the cops to stop. He tells them to stop blowing up the place because there's a little kid out there. But then he sees his daughter Kelly run outside, and the boy Tommy and Kelly, they're basically by the building, and because of the detonations that have been happening, a steel building over 50,000 tons is about to fall over, but Mike Rorick, aka Tommy Lee Jones's character, is able to rescue his daughter as well as the little kid. And that's a rather well done scene. Now, the only issue I do have with this movie, most of the special effects are good because a lot of it's done practically, but there is some CGI in some scenes that doesn't hold up the best, but it's a good movie other than that. But most of this movie uses practical effects. But anyways, let's get back to the review. Mike, his daughter Kelly, and the little boy Tommy so after a building collapses but they manage to survive, Mike, his daughter Kelly, and Tommy get out of a pile of rubble and concrete dust. I like the part when the little boy Tommy is being held in the police lieutenant's hands, and the police lieutenant says, "Let's go find your mom. What does she look like?" The little boy Tommy then says, "She looks like..." And then, you know, because the boy sees that everyone's face is covered in concrete dust, he says, "Look at their faces. They all look the same." Then it starts raining and everyone's faces wash off. But then Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Heche, says to Mike Rorick, aka Tommy Lee Jones, "If I was in charge, I would have evacuated the west side, sacrificed half the city, maybe made packing a little easier in Beverly Hills, but I would have been wrong." Then Mike says to her, if you were in charge, we would have known 24 hours in advance. You saved a lot of lives today. Then Emmett Reese, played by Don Cheadle, he meets back up with Mike, and he brings his dog, he brings Mike's dog, Max, to them. And, you know, Kelly and, you know, Mike are happy to see their dog reunited with them. But then Mike says, "I'm going home with my daughter," and Dr. Amy Barnes gives, Tommy Lee Jones, aka Mike Rorick, and his daughter a lift. The movie then ends with a volcano cloud of smoke, and the title and the words on the screen say "Downtown California, Los Angeles, volcano status active." Then the movie ends with the song "We love LA, we love it," you know. So yeah, at the end of the day, I really like this movie. Again, like I said, the only flaw I do have with the movie, the special effects do hold up well for the most part, but there is some CGI, mainly when Tommy Lee Jones's character, Mike, is running towards the building to save his daughter, that doesn't hold up the best. But other than that, this is a really good movie. It's honestly my favorite disaster movie. I mean, do not get me wrong. As much as I enjoy movies like Twister, The Day After Tomorrow, and Dante's Peak, I would put this movie above those. But yeah, very underrated film. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give Volcano a 9 out of 10. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching my review, and we'll catch you guys for the next one later.